All right. Here we go. Almost 9 o'clock. Getting ready to rock. Everybody putting the kids to bed. I know my little man is. Let's go ahead and get a couple things set up here. Oops. All right. Thank you, everybody, for hopping on, taking your night. I'm just trying to get set up here with a couple things to demo. See if I can get my phone mirrored on the screen here. There we go. Perfecto. All right. So we'll go ahead and jump back to the slides. Apologize, I'm a little bit sick tonight. Getting over a bit of a cold. Spending the weekend putting together a swing set for my son and caught something. Anybody who's on, just make sure you can hear me. Just say in the chat. Let me know where you're from. Let me know you're here. I could see you here, so you have to chat. So give it a few minutes here. If you happen to be a part of the Facebook group, let other people know. I see Deo. Let's see who the attendees are so I can call you guys out. Oh, we got Nanette. Sherry. Where are you, Sherry? How you doing? The Teakman. Jamie, Jessica, Charles, Bobby, Kimberly. All right, we got Shanna, we got some folks in the Facebook group. All right. Oh, Australia. What time is it in Australia? James, too, always messaged me at the weirdest times, so I never know. I'm in Boston, so it's 9 o'clock where I am. All right. So I don't want another 2.5-hour webinar like we did last time with Jason Van Orden. So we're going to go ahead and kind of start jumping through, and people can jump on. We got Quebec. Charles, thank you so much. Sherry, outside of NYC. I didn't realize you were that close to me, Sherry. I'm in Boston, so we definitely should get together sometime. Huntsville, Alabama. Kimberly, how you doing? I didn't see you today, or I guess I wasn't online a ton, but Jessica, 11 a.m. Wednesday morning in Australia. Nice. Love it. So we're getting ready to go to bed, and you're getting ready to kick the day off. Well, I guess 11 a.m. You're already in the day. Edmonton, is that AB? Is that Alberta? I'm guessing. And James, yo. All right. What's going on, guys? All right, so tonight I'm pretty excited because this is something that I've been getting a lot of questions from people. How do you connect with anybody online, first and foremost, specifically influencers? So James is always doing the most creative stuff. Specifically with influencers, I really got to get off my computer here. Oh, this is James too. So I'm pretty sure I just broadcasted that, James. So that's one way to connect with influencers, if you would consider me an influencer. Now I got to figure out how to get that off my screen. Awesome. So I've been getting this question a lot. So how do you connect with influencers? How do you build friends and a network of authority And I'm going to challenge you guys on this webinar for your what you think an influencer can do for you. I'm going to sort of give you my experiences and what I think works and what doesn't. Um, Nanette and Raleigh, nice. I don't know if I said that right, but yay, mate. All right, James. So when we go through this webinar, I'm gonna give you guys some somewhat unorthodox hints and tips that I use to connect with people, and also some things that are obvious that people I don't think they think about. So things that you might do in your offline world that you might take for granted and you don't necessarily do in the online space. And I was fortunate enough to meet with an online creators launchpad member today locally here. Um, and Debbie, I'm going to butcher her last name, Debbie. But Debbie and I met and kind of talked through, and Debbie Owen, and specifically, we were talking about how do you connect with people and get your Facebook group and your business off the ground. And one of the things I said was, we have this mindset that it has to be so different and mechanical and hard online. And I think anybody who knows me knows that the reality is it doesn't. In fact, I'm going to say it's just literally applying the things that you do every day to connect with people normally. That's what you have to do online. And the problem is we get in front of a computer or a phone or another device, and we sort of become mechanical. We become what we think we need to be. We start filtering things. We start overthinking things. We start becoming this persona that we have of what we're supposed to do. And and the reality is that's not how people connect. So first and foremost, I'm going to challenge you to think about influencers not as a goal, right? They're just people. And I'm going to share with you some stories about how I connected with people that I thought were ridiculously out of my league in my space. And ultimately they became friends and have helped me in ways that I just can't even thank them enough. And then also folks that you may not think are influencers are probably going to have a bigger impact on your business than you might think. So let's go ahead and jump through it. So there's the obligatory slides of who I am. Oh, let me go ahead and jump to my. Sorry, guys, totally unprofessional here. Well, we'll do it this way. So the, you know what? It's going to bother me if I do it like that. I got to do this presentation style. So first and foremost, when we think about influencers, we're thinking about somebody who maybe is way ahead of us in our business field, and so we automatically assume that it's going to be hard to connect with them. And I know I've said this a few times here. Here we go. Bam, bam. All right. So the obligatory stuff. So who am I? So the folks that are from the Facebook group know me pretty well. Thank you for that compliment, James, about the solid looking face. Sherry, Sam, yeah. So you guys have seen this before. This is my son. He teaches me surprisingly a huge amount in terms of connection with people, because everything I do leads back to him. So when I think about how I interact with somebody, I think about it from the perspective of what would I want that person to say to my son? And I know that might be a strange way to think of the world, but the reality is that's what matters to me. And that's actually part of the reason I think that what I do resonates with people, or I like to think so. Probably my amazing good looks as well help, but that was a terrible joke. But my son is a big part of that world. I've been in marketing a long time. That's really the end result. I've had the good fortune of sharing the stage with Chris Brogan, Sue Zimmerman, the Instagram expert who you see all over the place in the social media space. She's a great friend local to me here. Others that, Jared Easley at Podcast Movement, good friends that you now think of as influencers, but it would shock you to realize where they came from is probably where you are now. They were there probably, Chris a long time ago, Sue only a couple of years ago. And so I think you got to think about influencers in the same way you think about yourself. So that's kind of my point there. So again, this is sort of an example of how things were. Influencers had a part in this, and I will say it's not solely influencers and connecting with influencers, but connecting with people that changed my business from going like this, where I had no interaction, to going with great interaction. And we talked about this in the last webinar, but I just want to stress it because the crux of all this is that your goal is to connect with people. So you can do that one of two ways. You can go connect with random people. That's not effective. The other extreme is you can go to connect with only people that are ultra influencers in your space. And that's sometimes effective, but it's more of a positioning tool than anything. And then somewhere in the middle ground is really where I think you're going to have the most success. And I'll show you why. So what is influence is first and foremost. So it's the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something, right? I think we think of influencers as a means to traffic, but let's think about it a little differently. Those that have true impact and true influence on others in some form, they're people that generally are putting out great content, but the content connects deeply with a larger population of people. And so it impacts either their character, right? The self-help space is deeply embedded in that. So when somebody impacts your character, you have a strong connection with that person. Your development, no matter what the topic, if you're teaching cooking, you're teaching somebody to be a better cook, you're impacting the development there. It could be something in terms of a skill set or building a business, for example. You're impacting that person's development, and you're leading them along a path, or behavior, right? So we think of it mostly as influence is impacting behavior. So I can send out an email and I have 600 people that are going to respond or forward it on or do something with it. That's what we typically think of influence as. And that's sort of a fleeting version of influence. I think the first two are very, very impactful. And that's what you look for in true influencers. And somebody that I think I point to a lot for that is a guy like Chris Brogan, who's somebody who I spoke with actually Debbie Owen today about this whole thing. One of the things that makes Chris really great is that he remembers names like nobody I've ever met before. I will tell you that I'm the worst with names. I meet people and I forget their name 30 seconds later. I have to go through like this ridiculous exercise in my head to remember things when I first meet somebody. But Chris has this way of he'll meet you once at an event. A year and a half will go by, and then he'll see you again somewhere, and he'll walk right up and he'll say, "Hey, Keith." And that was actually my experience with Chris five plus years ago. And I saw him, and that had a deep and profound impact. Just the fact that he knew my name. And that's something that I think people on Facebook don't realize. So one of the things that you do is when you tag somebody, you're essentially calling them by name. But more importantly, I'll show you in a second. But when you tag somebody only with their first name, now you're actually going through a little extra step. You write their name, it types the whole thing, and you delete the last name. You're actually connecting with that person as if you were in a standard conversation, right? It's no longer this mechanical sort of thing. You had to take an extra step. Not everybody does that. But when you call somebody by name, that's the best and easiest way to kind of get their attention and to resonate with them. And they remember that you know them and that you address them in that way. So that's just sort of an aside. That's not one of the hacks, but that's just something to consider when you're interacting with people online. Your goal ultimately is to make sure that they are, the same concepts that we talked about last time, but seen, heard, and felt. And that's a recurring theme. So why do you want to connect with influencers? So first and foremost, you want to be seen as a peer. Now, this is something that a lot of people don't think about, but you want to connect with these people, but you don't want to come at it from the perspective of they're better than you. They, I think the ad I put out for this webinar was actually, excuse me, was actually, you know, are you wearing pants? And, then the next line says, because influencers put their pants on the same way that you do. And it was just sort of a jarring thing. And I got some funny responses from that. But what was interesting is you, you view these people on a pedestal, but literally, like I said before, they were like you a year, 2 years, 3 years ago, especially if it's online. But entrepreneurs specifically, I mean, to find somebody who's 5, 6, 7 years in, even they're in the rebuilding phase a lot of the time. So they've pivoted their businesses. So yeah, they may have a lot more of a following in a specific space, but they're always growing, changing, and evolving. And so they're open, everyone's open to some form of connection. Now, if you're trying to, if everybody's going to try to connect with this person, you're obviously going to be, fighting a lot of noise, but there are some hacks that we'll talk about to get yourself seen by that person. But then when you do get the opportunity to connect with them, you have to treat it as if you are a peer. And I don't mean you have to convince them that you're smart, because I fell victim to that a lot. I would almost have verbal vomit to try to get them to think I was smart. And instead of just listening and waiting, responding intelligently, and then, becoming a more personal relationship, which I later realized I was just kind of being an idiot. But I guess that's kind of my MO. I go out and figure it out as I go. But I realized when I was not trying to impress them and I was just trying to treat them like a normal person, all of a sudden, that 5-time best-selling author is just another guy or girl or woman, I should say, that's doing something that's really cool and really great, and they want to be recognized for that. So just like you would if you were doing it. Your ultimate goal, right, is to leverage their existing audience. So you want to get in front of their audience. That's the creme de la creme, right? Somebody who has 5, 6, 7,000 people on their email list. Somebody who, and maybe it's even far less than that, depending on what your niche is. But your goal is to get in front of their audience. And there's the immediate return of traffic that comes with that. But more importantly, there's the ability to leverage this content that you have for perpetual sort of evergreen use, right? So if you get in front of that influencer, you develop a relationship with that influencer, or that person. Let's just say anybody at this point who is on a similar path in a similar niche as you can leverage. Your goal is to then make that connection, be seen with that person. So if you've ever gone to a conference and you've seen how many people take pictures of each other standing next to each other and post them on Facebook, on the one hand, they're just trying to, obviously, well, the reality is what people are really doing is taking a snapshot in time so that they can then reconnect with that person later and, I guess, remind them of the experience, and then also leverage being seen with that person. So you see it a lot with folks that are, they see Pat Flynn at an event and they go up and they take a picture. And I think that's somewhat effective. But what's more effective is those people that are on the same path, and maybe they have the equivalent or a little bit bigger of a following as you do, or they're they have a podcast that's getting higher and higher rankings, and a website that's getting better and better rankings, for example, in whatever the niche is that they're in. When you're able to be seen with those folks, then you have that photo as proof. Like, you can use that anywhere, and as long as you're using it in the proper way, right? You're not going to oversell it, but just the fact that people see that you're physically at an event, you're with somebody who's another quote unquote influencer in the space, they automatically attribute you and that person and their paths to be equivalent. And ultimately that grows your network too. So as you build this circle of influence, as I like to say, you start to grow. So for example, you find a tribe. So, and I guess I'm already jumping into this is like bonus -1 number -1 hack or whatever, because I haven't even gotten to the 3 that I'm going to share with you. But when you find a tribe, So for example, for me, podcasters were a big tribe for me. So starting out with, they were folks that needed online course creation. They were creating content that was phenomenal, but they weren't monetizing it and they wanted to. So that's perfect, right? I'm not going to convince them that they need to do this. They knew they needed to. They just didn't know how. So I went to Podcast Movement 2014, the first one, and I met, I don't even know how many people. It was ridiculous. But what was interesting was it almost started as concentric circles, and the same thing's true online. But I would meet somebody, start talking with them. They would then, somebody else would come up to talk to them. They would introduce me, and that started organically. And then later on during the event, I would see that other person again, and it would just start all over again. And it was sort of like these concentric circles. And then what happened was you'd start talking like, oh, I saw that person. I met that person. And you started to notice these sort of rings building around you. And it was a lot easier to do that than it was to walk up to each individual person and say, hi, I'm Keith. Now, I did that when I was first starting out and I didn't know anybody there, but it's always easier to leverage your existing audience. So let's apply that, let's say, to Facebook. Facebook's actually an amazing engagement tool and an engagement engine. So if you start building influence with folks, so let's say you have a podcast and you interview someone on your podcast. That person has friends in a network that they've developed. And so you ask that person for an introduction to somebody else who might be on your podcast. And that's a great way to do it. Or online, the equivalent is you see them putting out content or having conversations where other influencers that you might like to connect with are talking to them, and you become a part of the conversation organically. And so what happens is you want to connect with, let's say, I don't know, let's just say, for example, you want to connect with Chris Brogan, and you see that I'm having a conversation with Chris Brogan, and you know me. So you jump into the conversation in the comments of a piece of content with me and him bantering back and forth, and then you become a part of it. And then all of a sudden now you're being seen with that person having a natural conversation. And then a couple more times later that you having more of an interaction with that person like Chris, then you have the opportunity to ask him for something, maybe your own interview, maybe a quote for a guest post, whatever it is. And I apologize for using the same example, but we can come up with any multitude of people to do this with. But the reality is you have something to leverage there. So you're leveraging your friendship to then get to the next step with an influencer that's within the circle. And then that circle gets bigger. So once you connect with that person, for example, when I was at that event, Chris introduced me to Mike Stelzner from Social Media Examiner, which I'd never met before. And then again, we connected on 5, 6, 7 other people that he knew that I knew. And, I think that was an introduction that I never would have had otherwise. So you do that a few more times, and then you start to look back and you're like, oh my God, I got this network of people that I didn't have a few months ago, and I had no idea that I could develop. And so that's ultimately the method that you utilize online to kind of grow circles of influence. So the normal view of influencers, as I mentioned, huge network, bestseller, massive following, right? That's what we think of. I'm going to challenge you to say, my view of influencers are folks that are on the path. James, that's were you Lord of the Rings? Yes. Lord of the Concentric Circles. So the definition I use are folks that are putting in the work. Those are the people you want to hook the wagon to. If you've been in the corporate world, they always say give the big project to the person who's the busiest because they'll get it done. And that's true online too. So when you find somebody that you want to partner with, the one who's not doing stuff frequently is not a good place to start, right? I don't care what audience they have. You're going to spend 6 months chasing a collaboration that isn't going to work if they're not putting in the work, actively connecting with folks that are in a similar space as you, trying to build influence in that niche. It's not worth your time. but they don't have to be at the pinnacle, right? You don't have to look for somebody who's on the top of the mountain to help you up, right? They're just too high on the top of the mountain. But find somebody who's walking the path and climbing and hiking next to you or just ahead of you and help each other. Help pull them up with you if there's somebody who's right there, alongside you, or if there's somebody just ahead of you. Reach out to them and leverage them because they're putting in the work. They're hustling. They're doing what you want to do, and you get a lot out of that. And they're going to build parallel communities to you that you can leverage back and forth. And I think ultimately they're headed in the same direction as you. So even if it comes down to just supporting each other and just being honest and saying, I'm struggling with this, which is what we do in the Online Creators Launchpad. Literally, this is what I'm struggling with. Are you struggling with this? Let's figure it out. And I think there's a lot of folks that can attest to this. That when you connect with folks that are on a similar path and you're vulnerable and honest about where you are, they're willing to give you the tricks that got them over the next hump and the next hump and the next hump. And then finally you look back and you're like, holy cow, like 2 weeks go by and you're like, I'm light years ahead. Even if it's just the mindset that you have, you're light years ahead of where you were before. And I think ultimately you want to connect with people who are growing a tribe, right? So putting the right content out is part of that. And ultimately you want to make sure that they're putting out obviously quality content. But whatever the medium, whether it's a Facebook group or whether it's an email list, the folks that you want to connect with, you want to make sure that they're actually growing something, right? They're not just putting content out there and not doing anything with it. Because ultimately that means, if you're not, and I hate to say the word of like, collecting, right? But if you're not collecting emails or gathering people into some medium that you have control over to put content out there and that you kind of are responsible for, then connecting with somebody who's not doing that is just kind of a waste of time. Even if they're doing the same thing as you, if they're not actively, building an email list or building a Facebook group or building some other method of connection, then, that's not going to help you grow because all of us on this webinar should be building an email list, or I'm the first to say I wholeheartly both feed in the Facebook realm, and there's ways that I take people to an email list, but I'm still better at the two-way communication via a Facebook group than I am otherwise. But so look for somebody who's doing that. So when you define an influencer, don't look at the end result and say they've sold 100,000 books. Look at somebody who's on a similar path as you, and it's going to be the same techniques we're going to talk about in a second will pay even bigger dividends. So hack number one is Facebook loves to make, it treats these as friends, right? So if you're connected with folks, and you can see some folks in the space here like Alex Jeffries and Kim Garst, they're folks in the social media space that I know and friends with. So it tells me those, but you can always find when there's somebody's birthday. Now, the actual feature in the hack is not the birthday surprise. This is actually a really cool hack. It's trying to leverage, an event like their birthday, and it doesn't have to be a birthday, but the birthday is the easiest thing because if you do connect with somebody and you see that it's their birthday, either because you've connected and they've accepted a friend request from you because they've seen you in another group and you've gone back and forth in comments, and then you just said, what the hell, add them as a friend, see what they do, and they actually accept you, then they'll start showing up as here. But everybody just writes a birthday wish on the timeline, right? And everybody knows that exists. So yeah, do you feel good that somebody said something? Absolutely. But what would it feel like if somebody took the extra step and it's kind of like getting a handwritten card versus a text message, right? So somebody texts you for your birthday, you're like, oh, that's awesome. They remember my birthday, but it was a low commitment, right? There wasn't a whole lot that they had to do. James is totally just blowing me up here. He's got his little one on his lap. He knows how to connect. So so the hack, and we're going to jump over. So this is a good one, actually. Sherry, you're on the webinar. So this is one that I thought was great, and I used it because it's easy on my timeline to grab this. But I like the way she did this. So she took a quote that's very flattering, right? And she put, she posted on my timeline. So a lot of the influencers that you're going to connect with are going to have public timelines, profiles, I guess you could call it. But it's akin to a handwritten card, right? So she's got this image, and it's a quick message, but I know that it took her more time to think about than the 2 seconds to kind of write that quick message through the Facebook birthday app, right? So that, don't discount how much that means, right? If I get a handwritten card in the mail, with somebody that I've done a previous interview with, blows me away. But this meant something to me, right? So I remember that Sherry did that. It meant a lot to me. And it was an extremely flattering quote. I do the same thing and I was using images exactly like this, the same way for other folks. And it was a great way to connect and show. And, and I'm always kind of the opinion, go ridiculous, go to the point where people just don't expect you to go, like in that level of thought. It's kind of like your spouse, right? Your goal when it's their birthday is to just go above and beyond. And every year you're kind of one-upping yourself. And that's kind of what I try to do. So I'm going to share with you guys, we're going to jump over to my phone. I'm going to share with you guys a really cool hack that you can utilize from your phone to connect with somebody that's not just an image, right? So if you've seen the images I create those in WordSwag. That's a free app. But this one is actually an app that I've never told people about. It's actually an app. I'm an app kind of freak, I guess you could say. It's an app called Legend. So again, this is something, hopefully it updates here on my screen. Let me make sure it does. Hold on one second. We're going to just make sure that it's working. All right, we're back. All right. So can you tell me can you guys just type in the chat box if you're seeing my my phone on the screen? Just want to make sure that I'm not showing myself. So the app, again, it's called Legend. It's an app to create quick text-based animation videos. Some people call them typography videos. And so, oh, Sandy loves Legend. So it's really cool. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this. So let's just, just for an example, because James has been blowing me up. There he is right there with his little one. So let's do this. I'm gonna show you an example. So let's say it's someone's birthday. Let's say it's James's birthday, even though it's not. We're gonna take his photo and we're gonna save it. And we're gonna save that on our phone. And I apologize for those Android users. This is an iPhone app. You could do the equivalent thing using other tools like Canva. Well, for an image. And you could go into iMovie or something else if you wanted to do something like that. But this is an app, so it's really quick. I do this literally when I'm, waiting in line, at the airport. I can create one of these things really quick. But it comes across with really with a really professional and impactful sort of way. So this is the app. So so I start out with a quote. So let's see. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna actually add a picture. So I just took James's picture and saved it to my phone. Slightly creepy, because when my wife looks through my phone, she's like, who are all these people? And here we go. So we're gonna take that image, and so now we're gonna type some text over it. So I'm gonna just say, James, you are the man. So normally what I'd put is like happy birth. I'd actually, think, I'd say happy birthday, and I would thank them for either something they did, or I really loved, um, I really loved your book, or something legitimate, right? You're not making stuff up. In the case of James, I'm gonna make tons of stuff up, but um, you at the man, you are the man. And in our case, we spoke recently, so thanks for the chat, right? Or not the hat. Thanks for the chat, right? And I'm going to put mate because he's an Aussie. And, just another step to show him that I actually know who he is, and that I appreciate him, right? Because ultimately that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to show somebody that you appreciate him. Now, this is really cool, right? So now you have all these different options for text typography sort of animation. So it's it's giving me examples, and down on the bottom there's a 1, 2, 3 button. So number 2, it gives you more layouts, and this is the step that you select the text, and you can see, so it's a little slow on the first step, but so it gives you a really cool way to animate the text, right? Something that people think, wow, this person put some time in. So let's just say, for example, here, I selected this one. So James, you're the man. Apparently I can't talk. Thanks for Chatmate. Sounds like a new website. Thanks for the Chatmate. So you can tell I do these things live because apparently I can't type. All right, so let's just select one of these. So I actually really like this one, which is, the text, handwritten text look. I prefer to use this, the filters down here on the bottom. So you see the things moving. Those are different kind of overlay and text colors. So you can actually, I could choose this, and that would be, one version. I could choose dark text, and it really depends on the background picture what you choose. So the safest I always go with is the really dark background with that white text over the front of it that matches all of my branding everywhere. And because he sees his picture behind it, he knows it's something that I actually created for him. It's not something that I, just found somewhere. And then I'm going to save this as so down at the bottom, I hit the more button, and it's going to actually create an animated video file. So success, your legend reached its destination. So now I'm going to go back to Facebook, and I'm going to go to James's timeline, and I'm going to, and I like how he's at the webinar, and I'm going to actually share this photo on his timeline. And I'm going to type something. So typically I'd say happy birthday here, but I'll just say, James, you are one of a kind. Thanks for being a friend. Totally lying. James and I are not friends. It's all a scam. Sorry, that was sarcasm. But the reality is, for somebody I don't know, I might not say, thanks for being a friend, but I'll comment on their content or an initiative that they have, like something they're promoting. And this, I'll tell you that I've got people that came up to me at events like a year later, and they're like, they just remembered it. And they're like, wow, that was really nice of you. I really appreciate it. And you could do the same thing by just getting really sincere with somebody. And I like how James, he says creep. You wore a shirt for that photo. That's great. So Sandy, you said, somebody on the webinar mentioning that they use Legend. And add that to iMovie, bam. So what I'm just trying to get at with all this, right, is so a birthday is one event. What if there was another event, like even if it was a launch of a product, you can create a similar thing that just says good luck, thanks for all that you do, good luck for the launch, right? And whether if they're a top tier influencer, let's say, and I hate to use those terms, they're going to see it and they're going to be impressed, right? And then it opens up the opportunity to then engage with their content a little bit more, and then maybe private message them for an interview on your podcast, or like I said before, a quote for a blog post. Any number of ways that you can help them achieve their goals, which is spread their message, right? And it's taking a little bit of time here to upload. But that's the idea. So the Legend app is pretty legend in terms of helping you create messages that resonate with folks. So let's jump back here to the slides. So that's hack number one, and you guys can play around with that, and it's really get creative with it. And like I said, just think about what somebody else wouldn't do or wouldn't get to the point where they would say openly. The next thing is the next thing is promoting people's stuff. So obviously, this is one of those ones where it's like, duh. But the reality is, promoting someone's stuff is really what, I guess, it's really what everybody wants, right? So everybody wants and feels excited when somebody posts content about their initiative or their new book or their new podcast, right? And so this is an example. This is Bo Henderson, who's a phenomenal guy, got his own radio show, books, phenomenal. We're working together now. But so this is an example of before he was even a client. I shared his book on my timeline, and tagged him in the post. We were already friends on Facebook, developed a bit of a relationship. But from this, a lot of folks that he was friends with and connected with, who saw my timeline, connected with me and said, "Oh, I noticed that you have Bo's book, and I noticed that you were interacting with him." And that was an interesting way to leverage a mutual friend. So, for example, I'm utilizing Bo, not intentionally. I sort of discovered it after the fact, but an example where I want to connect with his mutual friend. So I have content on my timeline that shows some form of connection, even if it's just a matter of you are really into this book and here are some takeaways, for example, from the book. You don't have to know the person, but if you do, it's even better. And then you connect with that other person via content, and they come and check you out. So you're maybe interacting in a Facebook group. They come and see that you're connected with this person. And then there's a level of credibility already established because they know that you're in the same vein of content and interest that they are, and if you know that person, that's the perfect opportunity to then ask that person for a connection. So a lot of times I'll post about something like this. I'll realize that, that person that I've, developed a friendship with has a connection to somebody that I want to meet. And it's sort of like LinkedIn a little bit, where you can ask for the connection. But I private message and say, "Hey, would you mind quickly connecting me with this person? I have something I'd love to connect with them on, get them for an interview or do some other form of content with them." And it works. It works really, really well. And I think people overcomplicate things. But it's just like an offline world, right? If you have a group of friends, you want to meet somebody else, you just ask for the intro, but be seen with the friend, and there's an automatic built-in credibility, right? So they know that person knows you, so you've been vetted, so to speak. And Facebook is great like that, because not only does Facebook, and this is part of the hack, but when they come to your timeline to check you out, it automatically shows them people that you are connected with that they are connected with first. So it's like, boom, all of a sudden now that influencer says, "Oh, well, you're connected to that person and that person and that person." Well, obviously, you're in the same vein and you're sort of pre-vetted. And that's where I talk about that circle of influence, right? As you build that circle and it gets bigger, it's so much easier to do those things because people start to see that you're connected with 20 or 30 of their friends, or more, or you have content from someone they know. It's just automatically vetted, that you're somebody worth their time. So um and then I'm gonna say this is sort of going out of your way. So is Tamika on tonight? I can't tell. um so with the concept of with the concept of influencer, so this is where I kind of come back to finding somebody who's on a path. And in this case, it's somebody who's trying to do something similar to what I was doing, right? So Tamika has a Facebook group, and it was parenting confident kids. And so she was on the last webinar, and I was really impressed by the message that she had. And I noticed that she was on the path and she was trying to do something that was really worthwhile, build this Facebook group, parenting confident kids. And so what I did was, I saw that she had implemented some of the things that we talked about on our last webinar, like, for example, um, profile picture being a close-up face shot. Your header photo on your profile, personal profile, is the image for the header of your Facebook group, um, with a call to action on it. And so, I saw it, and I honestly, I saw it and I said, well, you know what, this could be better and it could connect better, because obviously she did her best effort to create some graphics, and I'm like, this is something I very quickly can do. So and I'll show you, and you know what, just because we're doing some of the app stuff, I'll show you actually how I created it in another app. Um, and so I created this screenshot here, this header image here, parenting confident kids, in like 5 minutes on my phone. Again, engage, empower, excel. This was her language. And then I added the call to action, join our free Facebook community, and I private messaged it to her. And then she didn't see it, so I posted in response to her message. And it was me going out of my way for Tamika because I thought what she was doing deserved it. And that's something that, I'll be honest with you, I don't think a lot of people would even consider doing, right? So we all have this mindset of, I have to be paid for my time, and yet we spin our wheels for years with nobody paying attention to us because of that. So my philosophy is ultimately, do the things that nobody else will do, and you will build connections that are stronger than something you've never seen before. Like with Tamika, I mean, maybe she says she hates me now, but even since this, she's been a huge supporter, and she's been great in the Facebook group, and she's been super engaged. And this was just a few minutes of my time and advice, and sometimes it's just lending an ear. But it's something that you wouldn't expect from a lot of people, and if they did it for you, you would really feel great about it, and you would be somewhat indebted. Now this works for all levels, right? So for somebody like, I don't know, who's a great example of somebody. I don't know. I can't think of a name right now, but so for example, so with Sue Zimmerman, when I first connected with her, we did a webinar together, and I didn't have a real relationship with her, other than the webinar. But then what I did was, I took the webinar content and I created a workbook from it. So it was just so good that I just couldn't let it die. And so literally, I took the content, did it myself. Now I would probably give it to a VA. But I was just kind of interested in it. So I had taken notes and they were good. So I just typed them up. And then I was like, you know what? I can turn these into steps in this process. So I did it for her, and then I sent it to her. And she was like, you know what? I love this. This is amazing. And it's really for her value added. And she said, hey, do you want to create a course together and then, sell it together? And I said, well, sure. I mean, I've already done the work. And in that case, we were able to chop the webinar up and make most of the content from that. And from that, she's introduced me to a ton of people that she knows, and I've subsequently done the same. And um, so you can do that both for people that are, on a big rise. She had me on Creative Live, which is a big network that does live streaming courses, like 12,000 live viewers. So that was phenomenal. Um, but similarly, you can create a video, you can create a graphic, anything that helps them. And so I always say, if you see a gap, like if they could use, and you got to be careful with this, right? So you don't want to, if it's something they take pride in, then you don't want to kind of crap on what they're doing. Um, but if, for example, you take one of their videos is really, really good and impactful, and there were a lot of good takeaways. Create a one-page kind of opt-in freebie, like a summary of the content with some notes on it, as if it were theirs, and send it to them via Facebook, right? Because it's the easiest way to find them and connect. So you can do that with private messenger. Um, or, if you wanted to, you can just upload the file within their Facebook group. I've done that before to somebody I want to connect with. So I'll go to where their Facebook group is, and I will create some sort of augmented content, like a free one-page PDF of my takeaways from their content. But I didn't brand it with my stuff. I branded it with their stuff. And then I would post it in the group. And that person was just like, wow, this is amazing. Do you mind if I use this? And I said, no, that was the point. And now all of a sudden that person is like, wow, this was such a ridiculous value add. Um, you know, they basically wanted to figure out how to repay the favor. And so it was, in that case, it was a couple quick introductions to some folks that I couldn't reach before. So think about those ways. And Facebook, the reason I say it as a hack for Facebook is Facebook gives you everything that they're trying to do. And they're, posting content to try to further their cause, either in a Facebook group or on their own timeline, or on their Facebook fan page, which is sometimes the best place to look. And that kind of, I think that brings me to my next point. So, this is what we've talked about, right? So go out of your way to impress them. So whatever it is that you can do, influencers just want to be seen, heard, and felt. So they're like every one of us, right? They're trying to further their cause. They've built a following, but nobody's at the end. Nobody's, no matter how large somebody's career gets or their following, they're still not stopping, right? They're not saying, "Oh, I'm done." So your goal is to give them a platform, right? Anybody, whether they're new in the space or they're established in the space, you need to have a value add for them. And I know that this may seem pretty obvious, but I'll talk to you through kind of Chris Brogan and one of our first times, my opportunity to say I shared the stage with him. So I ran a meetup group, and this was offline. So this was years ago, but the same principles are what I do online. I was running a meetup group. We had about 2,000 marketers in the meetup group. We were local to Boston, and we used the Microsoft building to meet periodically. So try to do once a month, but I actually would do maybe quarterly. And what I would do is I would find people that were coming through the area who were promoting a book, or they had potentially a new course, or they were coming to speak at an event. And I would give them the opportunity to speak to my audience. And so these were people who didn't have a local following, and that was the gap that I identified. But it was great because they were already going to be there. They would already be doing other things, and it would give them an opportunity to see people, meet people, talk to people who could potentially be customers of theirs. And so I was adding value. I had a platform which had unique attributes in this case where it was local. And the same, so so essentially the same thing was what I did with Chris. So Chris was hosting an event in Boston for Owner Mag, and we had established somewhat of a rapport online. Um, but I needed, or he needed to fill seats at his event, and I essentially reached out to him and said, "Hey, I noticed you're having this event. I'd love for you to come." Um, Probably did it too soon. We only did it a week before, but should have done it, a couple weeks before. That's neither here nor there. But the idea being that I gave him a platform to come speak to people who he could then connect with others that were interested in his type of services. And so we had a lot of small business startups, entrepreneurs, but they were local, and he was looking for local folks. And so he came, spoke for an hour. We filled the room. We had over 100 and we had 300 people sign up. We ended up maxing out the space at like 150 people. And it was great. So I spoke on my topic. He spoke on, his topic. We did a shared Q&A. I got an opportunity to talk with him, build a relationship with him and his team. And, since from that point on, we had, back and forth rapport that, you couldn't really establish other ways. This example here is actually Ted Rubin is another good example. So Ted is actually, he preaches relationships, right? Return on relationships. But I was able to connect with him, in this case via Instagram, but the same thing again applies to Facebook. He was at a local at our local area in Boston, meeting with Sue Zimmerman and hosting another event. I saw that he posted on Sue's timeline, or Instagram feed that he was in town, and I messaged him and said, "I noticed you were in town. I'd love to interview you for the podcast." Now, the important thing here is the podcast interview happened a year before I actually published the podcast. That was my own fault, but the idea being, you don't even have to have the platform established yet, but you do have to commit to the fact that you're going to establish the platform. And it's a kick in the butt, right? So I was able to connect with him in person. I drove down and met him at his event. We took 15 minutes, went into a room, pulled out a digital camera and my mic and my laptop, did the interview, 15 minutes. Unfortunately, beforehand, I walked him into this room, which had glass doors, and walked him straight into the glass wall without even knowing it. And he got a big egg on his head. But he was great. He put ice pack on his head, threw it to the side when it was time for the interview, cranked at the interview. So then we got a video proof that we were together, and a video clip that I could use later in multiple ways, and an audio that I could use. So to take it back to what we talked about before, I now have proof, I shouldn't say proof, but now I have a way to show visually that I was with him physically. And for the online world, that's a huge thing, right? If you take the effort to go to an event or physically connect with somebody that is online, offline, that's like huge points. No matter what industry you're in, it automatically says these people are beyond what the norm is. They have a stronger connection than somebody who's just an online connection. You can do the same thing if you get on the phone with somebody. So, for example, a podcast interview, even if it's a virtual interview, is still hugely powerful because you can give them your platform and lend them your audience while still getting the opportunity to have the banter. And I actually say it's kind of like going to like a meeting or an event. It's the chit chat beforehand and the chit chat afterwards that are the most value, because ultimately that's the time when especially at the end, you've had the conversation with them, and at the end they ask about you, and you can start to give them enough, whatever you want, but you start giving them an idea of what you're working on. And many times they'll make a recommendation. Oh, you should connect with that person or that person. And then at the end, if they don't, you just say, is there anybody else that you think would share similar vision and be willing to be on the show? even if the show doesn't exist, or if it was an interview for a blog post, or an interview for your book that you're working on, or an interview for any number of things. So like with video, if you wanted to get you were doing an interview to just do a video to post on your YouTube channel, or just to post on whatever format, right? Into your Facebook group, a webinar, whatever the format is that you connect with your audience, lend that to those people. And now you've got the opportunity to build a relationship. And once you establish that relationship, it's easy, right? You now have a connection. So now when you post that content, you tag that person. And this is, again, why it's a Facebook hack. So I did this interview with him physically, where we connected through a medium like Facebook, or in this case, Instagram. And then I posted on Facebook and tag him, or post it on his timeline. He sees it. He remembers me. We have that connection. He probably listened. Well, I know he did listen to the episode again, and he shared it on multiple different mediums. So he shared it on Facebook. He shares it on Twitter. My wife was like, "What's going on with your phone right now?" And I said, "Oh, Ted just shared our interview on Twitter, and everyone's retweeting it and exploding." But that's really what you're trying to do when it comes to the traffic. But more so than that, it's being seen together. There's automatic credibility that gets transferred from his audience to mine, and vice versa. And that's really what you're trying to do. So almost done here. A bonus. So we all have our weakest area, and I don't want to pick on Chris. I'm not trying to do that. But for example, we all have a medium that we're particularly strong in, and an area that we are trying to develop that we're not as strong in. And I mean that from like a social channel. And Facebook has a couple different ways that people can connect, right? Facebook has your timeline. You can have a fan page, or you can have a Facebook group. Those are the three major ones. And usually people are good with one, but not all. So for example, for me, I don't spend a lot of time on my fan page. I really honestly use it just for ads. My Facebook group is where I spend all my time, and my timeline, I spend a fair amount of time. I guess not time, but I do share content in there where I get a bunch of engagement. But a guy like Chris, who is somebody who's putting out regular content, has a huge following, speaks at major conferences, you would think he has tons of content. And actually, this one's not his content, so those likes aren't even from him. But most of his posts end up with a few people commenting and liking, and it's public. So you could comment and like. So you could find an area where he's posting content that matters to him, and you comment there, and now you're seen. Whereas if you went into his Facebook group, you might just become one of a ton of people that are commenting on it. And actually, it's funny. I just noticed that my face is, that's the video that I did in Japan. I'm not sure why that's on there, but this is on his profile page. So I guess my point is, if you have somebody you want to connect with, no matter who it is, find the place where they're trying to be active, but they're not getting the engagement yet, and be that person to just reach out and comment, and make them feel validated for what they're doing in a genuine way. And then, you have the opportunity to do that a few times. And then if you have an ask, like a podcast interview, there should be a goal to these connections, right? The reality is, if you're going through the effort, you should either be trying to help them just to help them, or you should be trying to help them so that you can get them on an interview of some sort, right? To build that personal connection, whether it's a webinar, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a blog, post, or an article you're writing, whatever it is where you can get the time with them, and specifically voice, the natural sort of human voice and visual connection are the ideal, but as close as you can get it works as well. So that is it. I think I hit the hour mark. I actually have to say, so that is that is actually it. We're gonna open it up to questions now if folks have them. Um, but we hit the hour mark, and I didn't go like till midnight again. Um, so for folks that aren't part of the Online Creators Launchpad, which this one mostly everybody should be because I think I only shared it with the group. OnlineCreatorsLaunchpad.com. Please join. That's the URL. Share it. Please share it. We didn't hit my goal, so I'm somewhat disappointed, although we have maybe a day left. So between now and tomorrow, if we can hit the 1,000 member mark, so if you can each kind of go and invite or add, people that you think would be relevant, only if you think it's relevant. So add 5 folks to the Facebook group, I'd be indebted. So we can hit that 1,000 person mark before October 1st. That's just a personal goal that I'd like to get to. If you can, I honestly would be super indebted to you. So I really appreciate that. If you haven't already grabbed it, the Online Creators Launchpad Facebook group, you can go to the files section and you can download this is from the last one. I added Jason's face to it. This is my worksheet for creating a check. It's the checklist for 10 times your Facebook post engagement. This is actually a core part to connection, right? And getting a lot more engagement. So this is a bit of secret sauce. This is kind of giving away a lot here. So if you haven't grabbed it, I definitely recommend it. And Sandy, thank you so much for joining. Jeree so you want to talk about a super connector. So just because I think she really deserves it, is Jeree Freeman. She has Epic Connect, which is phenomenal. I mentioned her on the last webinar, but she connects with people in such a great way and shares her platform that she's building quite literally to build connections between people. And I think that's really the goal of all this stuff, is to make sure that you're giving people the chance to access your network, your connections, and in turn, they do the same, right? And so if you can successfully make people feel important and help them achieve their goals, it's unbelievable what you can do and how far you can reach. So if anybody wants to ask questions, feel free. I'm going to my other thank you, James. I appreciate that. He said I was amazing, and no, I appreciate that. So let's go ahead and let a couple people into the Facebook group. Amber, Sandy, Colette, Michael, Liam. So there we go. Thank you guys so much for joining. Again, onlinecreatorslaunchpad.com. Grab the free guide. If you want to stick around for 2 more minutes, I'll show you one other cool thing with some app stuff that nice. So let's see what Sandy had to say. Bam. Doing great. Thanks, Sandy. You're the best. So let's go ahead and show folks so there's another couple apps that I think are pretty cool. So we showed you the Legend app. We'll be talking about a bunch of these other ones. So this is the one, Hyporama. So the graphics folks out there, don't show this to your clients because it's just so good and so easy. So let's say I actually created one earlier. I'll show you where it is, and I'll show you how I created it. So I created this one for Debbie this morning. So reconnect with your kids, free Facebook community. If anybody wants one of these things and wants me to create one, I can't guarantee I'll do it, but I'll try if you send me a private message. So what I did for her was she wanted to create a header image for her Facebook group. So you can type in a search word to search for stock images. And so let's just say, for example, let's make one up. Let's say we're going to, I don't know, what's a good example? Let's say we'll do the example of a golf one. So we type in golf. I know this is somewhat generic, but let's say we wanted to make a a profile, a Facebook photo for golf. And specifically in this case, let's say we wanted to target this demographic of female golfers. So, so you got this stock photo, and then you could choose your size. So if I wanted to create an Instagram post, I could do that, and it creates a square image, a Twitter post, which this is actually really, really good for making Twitter images. But a Facebook header, you can do Facebook right here, Facebook header. And sorry, Facebook post. I hit done. And then I'm going to go ahead and choose my text down below. So these are, if I keep hitting like the Northern People, I keep hitting it, it's going to keep giving me different options with that font style. So let's say, let's just call it Ladies of Golf. That's going to be our Facebook group. Oops. And so, so I'm going to do a couple things. So I'll go through and I'll show you guys some examples of different ways to do this. So if I wanted to do something that, let's see, something that's a little ornate, I could do that and choose my font color down below. So let's say, for this one, I'd probably go with something. I don't want to be patronizing to the ladies. Let's just say purple for the hell of it. So I can rotate the text by that little arrow thing there. And then if I go to text tools, I can actually change the where is it? So here we go. Opacity is the opacity of the blur behind and around the text. So that's how see-through it is. The blur radius is how big it is. So I like to go the big blur radius so it stands out from the image. And then X and Y position. X is your left, right. Y is your vertical position of it. So you can see it shift up and down. And you could change the color of the background. So sometimes you want it to be white to just pop off. Sometimes you want it to be black. In this case, I'd go probably with white. And now I'm going to go to filters. And now filters is cool because you can add like different color textures to the background to make it more or less prominent. So for example, there with Chrome, it's a really vivid image. You could turn down the intensity below. But I like it because it pops. And then I'm going to go to overlays, and that's the next one on the top. And you see here you can actually add an overlay of whatever you want. So I like to add one that's really subtle. So you can do something really crazy, like I guess you can't see it on that one, but broken glass. But for example, something like that. So you can add dust particles. You can make it sort of rustic looking if you wanted to. So figure out what you like, what you think works. That's terrible. I would not do that. And then when you're done, let me just go back here to maybe one in the beginning. I'll do very, very subtle. There's other things you can do, adjustments to the brightness, contrast, exposure. That's really tweaky, but let's just say I wanted to do that. And now I go ahead and say, okay, share. And now it's going to save that wherever or post it wherever I want. So I usually save things to my gallery, or if I wanted to create I wanted to add more text to it, I hit reuse in the upper corner. And now I can add text down below here that says, this is the join our free Facebook community. So if you do that, bam, I like that to be in black because it pops, and then okay. And now I've got this saved to my gallery, which is your phone timeline, or I can post to Instagram. So you can see there, that's a way of creating a header image that now is saved to my phone. Bam, bam, So now I made that in a few minutes, and that's something you can do to make a really professional timeline photo very quickly without paying somebody to do it and being left with whatever they come up with. So go ahead, do that, and see you guys in the group. And thank you for joining me on this webinar. And I will talk to you all very soon. See you in the onlinecreatorslaunchpad.com, our free Facebook community. All right, guys, headed to bed, and I will see you guys in the morning in the Facebook group. Have a good night, guys. Bye.